The Future Laboratory was established in London in 2001, and we are a consumer insight, trend forecasting and brand strategy agency. And what that means is that we work with brands and we work with their service providers, their advertising agencies, their marketing agencies, to help them understand how the consumer is changing and how the future will present a whole different environment for product, for brands and for services. So we help brands to understand how the future world is changing around them and around the consumer.
In terms of how the world will change over the next decade, already we're seeing the changes. I mean, people talk about climate change and having to conserve energy. So what you're beginning to see now are what I would call the marshalling forces of how the world will change. Suddenly, overnight, we will wake up and think, you know, what a different world we're living in.
Whilst we're based in London, we have an international, a global reach. So we'll work with brands and with companies that might be based in London or Tokyo or Australia. So we've worked in Australia with ANZ, with the City of Melbourne, with the Just Group of fashion brands. But we also come to Australia to deliver our trend briefings, which happen either every year or every 6 months. And they are an overview of what's going on in culture, what are the trends that are affecting how the consumer is thinking about colour, about interior, about fashion, but also some of the bigger social issues, such as austerity or sustainability or the environment.
Increasingly in Europe, for example, 15 million people now work from home at least 3 days a week. Now, given the whole issue about, you know, the carbon neutrality, the carbon mile, the carbon footprint, increasingly companies will be forced by law to allow people to work from home.
So as an agency, our philosophy really is the idea that the future has already happened. It's just that it isn't very well distributed. I wish I could say I was responsible for that, but that idea actually is from the American thinker and writer William Gibson. But really, in essence, it takes on board everything that we think is important at the Future Lab, this idea that if you know where to look and if you can look hard enough, the future is already out there. There are people in our world who are adapting at a faster rate than some of us might be. Many of us actually, if you think about it, don't even live in the present. We tend to live in the past because it's more comfortable, it's cozier, we know what's going to happen. Very few of us actually live in the future. But our job for our clients and their brands is to find out what the future might hold, to find out where the future is already happening so we can case study consumers, we can get to grips with how they are coping with the future, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're believing.
You know, at the moment we work, you know, anything from a 35-hour week if you're French to a 48-hour week if you're Australian or English. But wouldn't it be nice to say, well, here's my diary for the week. I'll schedule my work capacity. I'll do my work at home, but the work is monitored independently. So people looking at your remote servers will be able to see what you're working, what you're uploading, how you're working with your teams. This is how businesses will work in the future. It will be project-specific and issue-driven.
So, as well as working directly with brands and with corporates, we also have an editorial output and remit at the Future Laboratory. So we produce magazines, we deliver content for magazines, where we really have the free rein to think about what the future might look like and to think about what the colours of the future might be.
You are seeing a world where families and communities and villages, those things we have forgotten about, actually reinvent themselves. And certainly the most fundamental and long-term consequential changes will be the shift away from what we call left-brain thinking, which is very linear and very didactic, to what people are calling right-brain thinking. Now, I think this has gone hand in hand with a whole trend that we have called womenomics. Because if you think about the past 2,000 years, you've had men dominating pretty much everything: science, technology, social, ethical, civil landscapes. And I think what we have seen over the past 50 to 100 years is a slow but careful struggle of women coming forward in key professions and areas.
So when we start thinking about colour and start putting together palettes of colour, it's very important for us to think about who's going to see this colour and the market that it's actually intended to to be for, because colour can really change according to where you are in the world. And I think it's very important to remember that this isn't just about geography and about climate, it is also about market trends. That you can certainly look at how colour in the developed world is going to be different from colour in the developing world, where there's a sense of understanding economic status. So if we look at colour palettes that we've predicted when we've been thinking about the BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, India and China, we're often thinking about a very different colour sensibility to the colours that we might be relating to the UK, Europe, South Africa and Australia, where we can see really clear lines of similarity in terms of mood and temperament. But of course, you then have to factor in how geographically Australia might respond to colour differently because of the light, because of the quality of living, because so much of Australia is about still outdoor living and about outdoor experiences, very different from the grey world that we see around us here in London.
So what you're seeing now are female businesses who are not necessarily women running female companies. There are men who are determining that actually our company needs to behave more like the female model to succeed. It's happening because we need ingenuity, we need consensus, we need collaboration, we need creativity, we need different ways of solving problems. These are all things you associate with how female intuition, how female intelligence, and how female right brain thinking functions.